Hi, Captain Peter Cutsey. This is my briefing room. I'm in South Korea. However, for this presentation, we're sitting at the holding point of runway 08 left in Muscat. Our plan today is to take off on runway 08 left on a planned route to Dubai. Once we get airborne and cleaned up, we'll cancel the routing and turn south. And we'll go through our exercise for today, which is CFIT EGPWS. That is the plan. So just before we go, we'll do a little briefing here. We're in the aircraft, and we're looking at the PFD and the ND. On the PFD, we have, of course, the barometric altitude, which is a tool in CFIT. And we also have a radio altimeter. And on the nav display, we have a feature that we can use is the fixed page and creating actual radials off of the chart for the minimum sector altitudes, which we'll have a look at momentarily for Muscat. The other tool I've just introduced by pushing center on the EFIS panel on the correct selector is the VSD. We can see that generated on the nav display. So we have the VSD as a tool. We have the radio altimeter, and we have the barometric altimeter, which we're going to talk about in the avoidance of anything close to a CFIT. You should never, ever in your lifetime be close to a situation if you're of a CFIT, if you're doing your job properly as a pilot. That is, do you have the correct altimeter settings set on your barometric altimeter? Are you flying at the correct altitude for where you are? If you're in an airport area, are you flying at the correct altitude as far as minimum sector altitudes are concerned? Have you made temperature corrections in cold weather operations to ensure that your true altitude is the correct altitude? All of these are part of airmanship and your training. So we're going to have a quick briefing here before we get going. And we're going to have a quick look at the FCTM of the QRH and a PowerPoint that I've actually encompassed all of that information in a format that makes it easier to look at and easier to study. Let's look at the FCTM. I've tailored it. I haven't changed it, just so that we can have a quick look at what the FCTM says with respect to terrain avoidance and in an RNAV environment and traffic alert and collision avoidance system and the use of TARA and TA only and transponder only mode. So the FCTM is Boeing's description. It's minimal, but however, it's adequate for what we're going to do. The meat of what we're going to be training, it comes directly from the QRH, from Boeing's QRH, in the ground proximity warning system and response. And the GPWS cautions accomplish the following maneuver for any of these oral alerts. So you have all of these different oral alerts, which could be a possibility. And this actually is these, I should say, are the actions. So this is directly from the QRH. So we're going to go ahead and have a look at that and condense it word for word in a PowerPoint presentation. So this particular PowerPoint presentation happens to be converted to Google Slides in my Google site. And if you actually subscribe to my package, you'll have access to this PowerPoint. Let's just look at the crew actions for this briefing. So accomplish these maneuvers for any of the following conditions. Activation of pull-up or terrain pull-up. Activation of pull-up or obstacle pull-up, or any other situation resulting in an unacceptable flight into terrain. Pilot flying, disengage the autopilot, disengage the autothrottle, aggressively apply maximum thrust, simultaneously rolling wings level and pitching up to 20 degrees of pitch, retracting speed brakes. If terrain remains a threat, continue rotation up to the pitch limit indicator, if available, or stick shaker or initial buffet. Pilot monitoring, your job is to assure maximum thrust has been set and verify that all the actions that the pilot flying should have done, that they have been completed. And if they haven't been completed, point out the omissions. Note, maximum thrust can be obtained by advancing thrust levers full forward if the EECs are in the normal mode. If terrain contact is imminent, advanced thrust levers full forward. The term we use is firewall. Just move them until they stop, full forward. All right, let's go and have a look at the continuation, the second slide here under crew actions. Pilot flying, do not change gear or flap configuration until terrain separation is assured. Monitor radio altimeter for sustained or increased terrain separation. Remember, your radio altimeter becomes alive at 2,500 feet above the ground. And most companies have a call in their SOPs to make sure that radio altimeter is alive. And I've done a beautiful power, or I should say an MP4 briefing on radio altimeter alive in my package in Google Drive. When clear of terrain, slowly decrease pitch attitude and accelerate. Pilot monitoring, monitor vertical speed and altitude, that is radio altitude for terrain clearance and barometric altitude for minimum safe altitude. And we are going to have a look at a little tip and technique where you can use the fixed pages on your nav display to actually mirror the charts from your JEPI or LIDO charts. All right. Call out any trend towards terrain contact. So the pilot monitoring's position is most important. 3 notes. Aft control column force increases as the airspeed decreases. In all cases, the pitch attitude that results in intermittent stick shaker or an initial buffet is the upper pitch attitude limit. So flight at intermittent stick shaker may be needed to obtain a positive terrain separation. Use smooth, steady controls to avoid pitch attitude, overshoot, and stall. So you're going to pitch up to 20 degrees, and if that doesn't do it, you can increase your pitch to the buffet or shaker. And on and off is recommended until you finally get the correct clearance you require. Today, we're going to talk about 9,100 feet as being the correct clearance, and we'll go and talk about that in a moment when we get back into the airplane. Note 2, do not use the flight director commands. You must disregard the flight director commands and use raw data. As I've outlined in one of my briefings of 140 briefings in Google Drive, talking about the cake and the frosting. The cake is the raw data and the frosting is the magenta. No frosting today. Just look at the raw data. Note 3, if positive visual verification is made that no obstacle or terrain hazard exists when flying under daylight, VMC conditions, before a terrain or obstacle warning, the alert may be regarded as cautionary and the approach may be continued. For example, here in South Korea at Gimpo, a domestic airport where we do flight training in some cases, and a traffic pattern flying off of runway 14 right to the south, or runway 32 left to the south, you will encounter radio altimeter excursions and occasional alerts. and you will be clear of the mountains. And if you're clear of them and it's obvious, you can actually regard them as cautionary only. Now, if you're not sure, you certainly would carry out the escape maneuver. That's very important. The PFD nav display, the fixed page here with the 360 quadrant, 090 radial, 180 radial, and 270 radial as per chart that we can have a quick look at here. This is one arrival chart in Muscat. And if you've noticed, the origin on the fixed page is the Muscat VOR, which I put on the fixed page on the nav display. 4100 northeast, 3600 northwest, 8500 to the southeast, and 9100 to the southwest. The most restrictive is 9100 feet, and that's the one that we're going to use on our recovery. So we have actually superimposed those on the fixed pages on the nav display. Why not? Use the fixed pages. This is a technique. Stick with your company SOPs. Your company SOPs may tell you not to do this, well, fine. But for the sake of this exercise today, we're going to do it because it's really good thinking. All right, back to the flight deck. Here we are. We're all set to go. This is part one. So visit me in part two, where we will actually talk about the exercise before we do it. And then in the following part three, we'll actually fly the exercise and for a demonstration on how to do the right thing on the flight deck. Thanks for watching.